As of right now, there are over 4,000 skins in Overwatch. So that got me wondering, how many lore accurate skins are there? Well, you'd be surprised. I found a lot more than I thought. I'm going to go over every lore accurate skin in Overwatch that I can find, but what counts as lore accurate? Basically, any skin that a character wears in the main Overwatch universe counts. This means that alternate dimensions that are not mentioned in lore, like Mirror Watch and Star Watch, do not count since they are alternate dimensions. In a theoretical world, if these alternate universes were made canon, then I would put them on this list. But from my research, they were never mentioned. Like and subscribe if you enjoy, and just double check that you're subbed so you don't miss a video. Chapter 1 is pretty simple. These are any skins that we see in the animated cinematics. I will try and blitz through these just so we can talk about more obscure ones later. So first off, every single Overwatch 1 skin and Overwatch 2 skin are definitely canon. And the first lore accurate skin that I could find is Strike Commander Morrison. No surprise there. This is then followed up by Soldier again, being Formal 76. Keep in mind that many skins are going to look differently in the cinematics than they do in-game. However, I will still count them as long as they're not too different, or if the skin references its canonicity, which sounds a little weird now, but I promise it will make sense later when I get to later skins. In the same cinematic, we see Captain Amari Ana, and then in the last Bastion, we see Overgrown Bastion. But then we run into a complication. You see Bastion has a skin called Omnic Crisis. However, that skin isn't him since he is not painted that color. So here is how I will count it. If an Overwatch hero skin is another character in the lore of Overwatch, I will count it. So this means that Omnic Crisis Bastion is lore accurate even though the skin is not him. This distinction is really important to make and will definitely come up later. Next is one you might not have known about or remembered. In the Junkertown The Plan animated short, Junkrat and Roadhog put on disguises. And these disguises were Hayseed and Sharkbait respectively. Now is a very good time to bring up the case of reskins. I'm really not too sure on how I should do them, so for the most part, I will not count them unless I have a good reason to. So this means that Scarecrow Junkrat and Mako Roadhog will not be canon to me. However, just in case you disagree, I will try my best to mention every reskin, but I'm pretty sure I stopped doing that later on. In Rise and Shine, we have probably the most requested skin of all time being Pajame. That's just a little fun fact for those of you who didn't play in Overwatch 1. Pajame, everyone was going psycho over it, and then they eventually added it. This is then followed up by Eco Point Antarctica May. In Honor and Glory, we get Crusader Reinhardt and Baldric. Keep in mind that even though Baldric is another character, I am definitely counting him as a lore accurate skin. Speaking of, Griefheart is also lore accurate since Baldric's overgrown corpse is there. In Shooting Star, we see Nano Diva on a billboard, and we also see the Guishan Omnics. Guishan Omnics are particularly from the East China Sea, and funny enough, Bastion has a Guishan Omnic skin. I wasn't sure if I was going to count this or not until I found out that Guishan infantry bastions do exist, so it counts for sure. In the Wastelander, we see Wastelander Junker Queen, and we also see Junker Wrecking Ball, and again, I'm not going to count the reskin. Moving on to Genesis Part 2, we see Ironclad Torbjorn, Chief Engineer Lindholm, and Horus Anna. Then in Calling, we see Vigilante Sojourn.
Oh yeah. An indoor chain link fence.
Next, we will blitz through the origin stories just like we did with the cinematics. These were cute comic-like stories that weren't fully animated, however they give us a lot of lore-accurate skins. First we see Slipstream Tracer in her origin story, then we see Orissa's OR-15 skin, and then in King's Row Uprising we see Lieutenant Wilhelm, Cadet Oxton, and Combat Medic Ziegler. By the way, if I ever butcher any of these skin names, I am so sorry, I'm just kinda doing it fast and loose. And so I'm probably gonna mispronounce some of these names. I wanted to save these skins for when I talked about the PvE missions. However, since they already are mentioned and I already mentioned Torbjorn's Uprising skin, I may as well just add them now. Speaking of, in Mora's origin story, we see Scientist, and again, I was going to save all the Blackwatch skins for when I talked about the Retribution PvE event. However, we see them all here, so I have to count Blackwatch Cassidy, Blackwatch Genji, and Blackwatch Reyes all on screen. We actually saw Blackwatch Reyes earlier, but I purposely skipped them to talk about them with this group of skins. And that might actually be the case for many skins, so keep in mind that if you see a skin and I don't talk about it, I'm probably going to talk about it later. And what's really funny is we actually don't see Blackwatch Mora in her origin story, at least the version that we have in-game, but I'm just going to count it now just because I talked about the other 3 Blackwatch skins. Oh, well, actually, in the Retribution event, we also see Talon Doomfist, and since we don't see it anywhere else, I'm gonna also count him here. I just am adding him now just so I don't forget later, because Talon Doomfist is a very important lore-accurate skin, and I can tell you right now that I do not want to miss that, and see that in the comments. After that, we got Engineer Brigitte from her origin story, and then we get Talon Baptiste from his. And then we potentially get Dr. Deku pair for Sigma. The issue is that the only matching part of the skin is his face, with the rest of the clothing being very off. So I'm not going to include the skin, but I really wanted to mention it because it was kind of close, not really. It's just unique because we don't have a young version of Sigma besides this. Subject Sigma, on the other hand, I will include since we do see Sigma in an orange jumpsuit that closely resembles the skin in-game. Keep in mind that the skin in-game does look a decent bit different from the one in the origin story. However, it's close enough for me, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. In Sojourn's origin story, we see the clothing of her Captain Chase skin, and finally we see Porte Pax in Maga's origin story.
We'll ask you to be gentle.
Chapter 3 will be short and sweet since I've already covered a majority of the skins. Let's get the Omnic variants out of the way. Null Sector Bastion is seen in the Uprising PvE mission alongside Null Sector Orisa, and then we can skip all the way to Overwatch 2 where we can see Sparkplug Brigitte from the Ironclad mission.
Do you want to eat?
Already onto Chapter 4 is the short stories. Here is where things get a little bit interesting. There is so much content to cover when it comes to the comics and short stories that I will be separating them into 2 chapters accordingly. I do want to start with the short stories in particular since it's super easy to pick out the lore accurate skins in them, but keep in mind that I did not reread the stories since they are very time consuming. However, there is a chance that I missed a skin that was described in the story, so please tell me down below if somehow I missed one. But I do highly doubt it just because the short stories do normally take place in one area, and wardrobe changes are just not likely during that. First we got Bastet Anna on the cover of Bastet, then we got Combat Medic Baptiste from the cover of From What You Left Behind, and then we also have Tropical Baptiste from the same comic. In the short story after that, we get Dr. Ziegler Mercy from Valkyrie, and then 2 stories later we get Deadlock Ash and Deadlock Cassidy. Then in Code of Violence we get Dusk Reaper, and also in that same short story we get Talon Sombra, and even though the hair is different, it clearly still is Talon Sombra. However, I want to quickly talk about Talon Sigma and Talon Widowmaker while we are here. Every other Talon skin that aren't from Mirrorwatch are lore accurate, but what about these 2? They are never mentioned or seen in the Overwatch universe. In my opinion, it is super likely that these 2 skins are canon, with Widowmaker's Talon skin being from when she started getting brainwashed until her skin turned blue, and Sigma just having a generic Talon skin. However, the issue is that if I count them, I would have to go through every single other skin, stuff like Troop Commander Sojourn, which have a high likelihood of being canon based off of the other skins we have seen so far, and decide if they are lore accurate just because of how likely they are to exist. So since I haven't seen them or heard about them, I'm going to play it safe and not count these 2 Talon skins. However, I really wanted to, and I keep going back and forth on whether I should count them. There is a chance that all Talon skins are just implicitly lore accurate that aren't Mirrorwatch, but I would feel very irresponsible putting them on this list without more evidence, so please tell me what you guys think down below in the comments. I did want to mention them though, just in case they do end up being lore accurate. After that long discussion I didn't want to talk about, we see Wandering Monk Ramatra on the cover of Ramatra Reflections, and that is actually it for these short stories. Moving on to the comics, the only ones that I don't count as canon are Starwatch, Transmission, and Yeti Hunt. Starwatch completely conflicts with the lore of Overwatch without being an alternate universe. Same with Transmission, which was the Transformers crossover comic. While Yeti Hunt is technically possible, however, I'd argue that Mei is acting too out of character for this to count. And I highly doubt that she would, during the events of Overwatch 2, go out of her way to start hunting down species that look like her friend Winston. However, if this is somehow canon, then Yeti Winston is also lore accurate. We will talk about Yeti Hunter later, I promise. Moving on to the canon comics, we see Vishkar Symmetra in A Better World. In Old Soldiers, we see the Shrike mask on what looks to be the default Overwatch 1 Ana skin. However, even though it looks like the Overwatch 1 Ana skin, I'm going to count it as lore accurate. But why though? Well, I personally would think that a skin with default Ana with just a mask would be pretty boring, so I'm guessing the Overwatch team knew that too. Therefore, they made a skin that looked a bit more unique, even if later on it didn't make much sense with the comics. This is what I meant by a skin clearly referencing a point in the comics, or the other way around, where the comics is clearly referencing that skin. That mask is just so iconic that it is hard for me to believe that they were not making a reference either the skin to the comic or the comic to the skin. So I'm going to count it in this scenario, but if you disagree, I would understand, because it does look very, very different. Speaking of people disagreeing with me, let's follow that up with another hot take. Ugly Sweater Winston from Reflections almost should count as a lore accurate skin. I almost counted it for the same reason I counted the last skin. However, the sweater that Winston wears is just way too different from the actual skin. The sweater from the comic is just way too boring to be an actual skin, so I thought to myself, hey, it would make perfect sense if the Overwatch team purposely made the skin look better. However, I ended up not adding it just because it was a completely different design sweater, even if the colors were the same. It's kind of like how I didn't count Dr. De Couper for Sigma, because even though the skin is probably referencing that event, or at least young Sigma, it is just way too different for me to count, and nothing super iconic besides the face. Again, this is why I said this might be a spicy take, because I did count the Honest skin, but not these two. However, it was so close to being on the list, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. Reflection actually has two more skins, being Santa-clad Torbjorn and Casual Hanzo. Next up in the Uprising comic, we see what is most likely Night Ops 76 for Soldier. After that, we got a pretty unique one in Masquerade. Off the bat, we can mark off Jester Sombra and Masquerade Reaper. However, we got another controversial one. The Widow skin we see on screen is a recolor of her Odette and Odile skin. I seriously have no idea how to rule this. These skins make perfect sense for her to have in lore. However, why couldn't they just make my life easy and make it her Odette skin? Like, or the Odile, I don't care. My life would be so much goddamn easier if it just wasn't a different color. So now I'm gonna probably make a potentially logic-breaking decision, and I'm gonna count the Odette skin as lore accurate just because it is an obvious reference to the Widowmaker skin that we see on Masquerade. It is literally the same, but with different colors. Again, I have no idea why they didn't just make it like a white and black color or something like that. But this decision actually makes me feel so much worse about leaving her Talon skin out. Like, I literally almost added it because of this skin. However, we literally see the skin on the cover of the comics. It's right there. It's just a different color. She just accidentally put it in with the red and black colors, and it mixed the colors in the washing machine. I'm going crazy. However, I do feel a little better. I do feel a little better because Sombra's Jester skin, right, has a little tutu in the comic, but in-game it doesn't. So this comic obviously does have some minor differences between the skins in the comic and in-game. But what I'm basically trying to say is because Sombra's skin is different in-game and to the comics, I am willing to be okay with the recolor difference from in-game to the comics also. You could even argue that Doomfist's formal, which also is in this comic, is slightly different than the one in-game. I mean, I don't even think he has the gauntlet in the comics. So like I said, I am perfectly okay if the comics and games do not perfectly translate the skin. I was just flipping out because of how different the colors were from the two skins. But I would say that every skin in this comic besides the Reaper one do have a translation error. So I'm just going to assume that they are referencing the skins in-game to the comics, or vice versa, the comics to the in-game, even if they are slightly different. Again, this might break some of my logic that I used earlier, and I really don't know what I should do. So please comment down below what you would have done in this situation. In New Blood 1, we get Sandstorm Cassidy. In New Blood 2, we have Aviator Farah. And in New Blood 4, we see Siberian Front for Zarya. Any reskins are possible, but I'm not counting them just in case. Man, I'm sure glad that the comics are over. I was gonna flip out by how hard that was in some scenarios. I really hope I don't miss anything. Oh wait, I didn't even open up the Junkenstein one. I mean, I'm sure there's not gonna be anything. I mean, Junkenstein surely isn't canon. Oh, what are they doing? Why are they wearing Halloween costumes? I mean, I guess that's cute. I guess I'll add. Wait, Reinhardt, what are you doing? Why are you telling a story? What are you doing? You guys know how I said any reference in lore to a certain skin automatically makes it canon? Well, since Reinhardt is literally telling us the story of Junkenstein, that means that anything Junkenstein related is canon. Obviously, Junkenstein isn't a real person, but it's in the Overwatch lore. And by our rules, if they exist in lore, they are lore accurate, unfortunately. Meaning that I have to talk about every skin that is related to Junkensteins. You guys remember that rule? I want to go back on it. Freaking Omnic Crisis Bastion. I want to retcon you, but I can't. I foreshadowed that this rule would come up, and this is what I was talking about. This is what I was foreshadowing. Okay, here we go. First off, we got Witch Mercy. The Witch Mercy skin actually seems to be the wrong colors. However, don't worry about it, you'll see why in a second. We then got Corsair Anna, Van Helsing Cassidy, Viking Torbjorn, and Daredevil 76. Training Bot is also lore accurate, let's go! Anyways, with the Halloween costumes out of the way, it is now time for the long list of skins that are a part of either Junkenstein's Revenge or Wrath of the Bride. We got Junkenstein, Junkenstein's Monster, Witch Mercy, again, but more accurate. This one is the actual Witch Mercy skin. Pumpkin Reaper, Dragon Symmetra, Bride Sombra, Banshee Mora, Gargoyle Winston, Marionette Echo, Flying Dutchman Sigma, Coffin Bastion, Cyber Detective Sojourn, Executioner Junker Queen, Witch Kiriko, and Warlock Ash. But guess what? We aren't done yet. Since Junkenstein's Laboratory, although not confirmed to be lore accurate by any means, is close enough that I am willing to assume the skins in this game mode are also likely lore accurate in Reinhardt's fancy little story that has extended this video out by 5 more minutes. The reason I believe them to be canon, by the way, is since there are skins that we've seen before like Banshee Mora or Pumpkin Reaper, and it's also suspicious that you are locked into these skins. It really makes me feel like the Overwatch team is telling us that these skins are supposed to be a part of Junkenstein's. And since Junkenstein, in my opinion, should be counted as lore accurate, here we go. Oh boy, how am I gonna say this? Shin Raiyong Diva, Coldheart Reinhardt, Demon Orisa, Stone Crow Genji, Enchanted Armor Pharah, Slasher 76 Soldier, Divinator Kiriko, Conjurer Mercy, which is actually the third Witch Mercy coloring I have mentioned, even though one of them is technically not a real skin, and Zeolot, I don't even know if I said that right, Zenyatta. But haha, you thought we were done. Nope! I forgot to read about Overwatch Halloween Terror 2017, The Return of Junkenstein, which adds Zenyatta Cultist. Genji seems to be a part of it, but I don't know what skin it is. Theoretically, it could be Stonecrow Genji again, but I don't actually know because I think the comic came out before the skin. And Huntress Widowmaker. But wait! There's more! I just went to the top of the freaking page, where was I? There are actually 3 playable heroes in Junkenstein's Revenge that you are not locked in for. These heroes are Baptiste, Tracer, and Brigitte. That's because they were a part of Junkenstein's Revenge and not the lab game mode. Now why do I bring them up? Well, it's simply because we know what skins are most likely, if not confirmed, to be their Junkenstein skin. For Baptiste, it's not confirmed, but it's possible to be Vampire. I can't add it because there's no evidence to this, so I'm not gonna add it. For Brigitte, we know it will be Shield Maiden, since the skin has a description explicitly telling us that she is the Viking, daughter to Viking Torbjorn. And since Viking Torb is canon, so is Shield Maiden Brig. And finally, for Tracer, she is called a ghostly Will-O-Wisp. And by no small coincidence, she has a Halloween skin called Will-O-Wisp. Therefore, this reference is strong enough for me to count this skin as lore accurate. I know some of you might disagree with me on whether some of these skins should count or not, and you may even disagree with this whole chapter, but hopefully I made a good case on why they should or shouldn't count. When I sent this list out to my Discord, I was told that the Ana Mythic skin is actually a failed clone of Ana Amari. Now, I didn't think much of it until I found out that it was true, alongside many other Omnic skins. So funny enough, there are many Omnic skins that are lore accurate since they are Null Sector Omnics, or robots. These include A7000 War God Ana, C455 Sharpshooter Cassidy, P900 Warhead Pharah, S900 Sentry Symmetra, and K2000 Blade Master Kiriko, since knives are apparently better in combat than guns. Do keep in mind that this information is coming from the Overwatch wiki, since I sadly don't remember if these skins were mentioned to be canon or not when I played this. So take this chapter with a grain of salt. However, these Omnics or robot skins do make sense within the Overwatch lore, and I am willing to trust the multiple people who have told me that this is true, including the wiki.
Could I get it toasted one more time?
When you pull up an Overwatch skin, it has a chance to have a little excerpt about the skin. If this description alludes to the fact that the skin exists in lore, I am going to consider it to be lore accurate. There is honestly no good way to do this, so I'm going to go in alphabetical order and put some Overwatch gameplay in the background to keep you entertained. Maybe some Subway Surfers too occasionally. Keep in mind I won't talk about reskins just because that would make this go on for so much longer. Ana's sniper skin implies that she wore this skin while in the military. Cabana implies that Ana goes to Hawaii and wears this outfit. Socialite Ash references that she feels as comfortable at charity balls as she does on a motorcycle. This implies she has worn these nice clothing. Desert Ops tells us that Baptiste wore outfits to fit his environment. Mechanic Engineer implies she wore the skins before taking up arms. Oh boy. Teguki Diva implies she wore this skin to gaming events. Academy implies she wore this outfit to high school. Diva's Junker and Scavenger skins are the first ones on this list that I wouldn't count as canon. The description implies nothing about Diva ever wearing these skins to Junkertown, and I personally don't think she has ever been there, so I can't count them as canon. Doomfist's Iron and Caution skins both talk about how he lost his arm and turned to cybernetic. Although true, these skins are way too much for me to count as canon skins. Bedouin and Nomad Genji talk about how Genji wandered the world to come to peace with his body. Unlike Doomfist, Genji is much less human and is able to alter his look dramatically, so I will count these as skins. I will also count Sparrow since the descriptions imply that this is what he looked like when he was younger and called Sparrow, and we will come back to the young Genji skin. Sion Hanzo implies he would wear this outfit during lucrative trades, and Young Master implied he was groomed. We will talk about Young Hanzo later. Jester and Fool Junkrat both have descriptions, but it's a reference to the phrase, "A fool and his money are soon parted," and not to him actually wearing the skin, so I'm not going to count it. King Jameson was actually a skin I wasn't going to count as canon. However, after thinking about it, it probably is canon, since it is very likely that he would have the materials to make the outfit that he is wearing. I would also argue that the description implies that he wore the skin in the first place. However, an even weirder scenario is how bleached, drowned, radiated, and rusted all have descriptions. It talks about how the destruction of the Omnium made Australia an even more dangerous place to live, but nothing about the skins. I sadly am not going to count them, since if Junkrat has the time to paint his prosthetics and bombs, then that implies that he has good downtime. And if the Outback is so dangerous, why are the skins showing us his downtime rather than him surviving in the Outback? Obviously he does have some supplies like a canteen, but I don't think that is enough to make the skin lore accurate. I really wanted to add a rare skin as lore accurate on this list, but alas I couldn't. Solakeo and Striker imply that these are the uniforms Lucio would wear while playing football. Andes implies he wears this in the winter. Synathsia, I don't know how to say that, and Adativa assume he wore these outfits during his album release. Abominable assumes that May would wear this in remote regions around the world. We will come back to Yeti Hunter later. Jen Osin assumes she wore this in prominent hospitals. Minister and Oasis implies that Mora would wear this while working with the Minister of Genetics. And I stuttered a little bit there because I actually just remembered that I saw one of these skins in the Hazard comic and I didn't mention it earlier because I just read the Hazard comic for the first time. Very sorry that I forgot that, but luckily I remembered here. Security Chief is probably the armor Farah wore while working with the Helix Security International. And Anubis may actually not be canon, since there is a scene of her fighting Anubis in her regular armor, or at least I think it's Anubis. However, I wouldn't be surprised if she wore this outfit for either a ceremony or as a backup pair of armor. Soldier 24 is an alternate look of Gabriel Reyes. Bundens Were implies that he wore this outfit when he first joined the military. The only issue with this skin is that it's older Reinhardt and not younger Reinhardt, so it's very likely that he still has this armor to this day, but just keep in mind that the skin is slightly different. Militia is likely the outfit Roadhog wore while rebelling in Australia. Commando 76 probably lacks underwear, but also is the outfit he wore during his time in the armed forces. Azucar and Los Muertos Sombra are apparently highly contested on whether or not they're lore accurate. This is due to her appearance being a bit dramatic with the glowing tattoos. However, the Overwatch wiki mentions that these tattoos are actually paint and therefore could easily be washed off over time. And for that reason I am perfectly fine with including them, since we know Sombra worked with them at a young age. Architect is another one of Symmetra's work clothes. Utopia is a city in India, at least in the Overwatch universe, that Symmetra likely helped build and wore this outfit. Cybjorn for some reason has a quote on it, and the quote doesn't really make sense with the skin, and it's not going to make it lore accurate, but it is potentially a reference to the fact that his turret has a dildo extension on it, and you can ride the turret in the Ride 'em highlight intro, where he just so conveniently is sitting on it. Specimen 28 implies he wore this outfit during development on Horizon Lunar Colony. This is most likely the same with Horizon. Horizon and Lunar Hammond actually don't make sense because Hammond built his spacecraft to escape with Winston, and not during his time on the moon. Therefore, him having a mech doesn't really make sense unless they taught the hamster to make lethal weapons like machine guns. However, I would argue that since I included the Diva Nano skin from the cinematics without seeing her mech, I should include these two skins since even though the mech doesn't make much sense, he would have most likely worn these clothings on the moon, and the skin only has the mech for gameplay purposes. Arctic Zarya implies she wore this outfit while enlisted, and finally Weightlifter and Champion are assumed to be her outfits while becoming a champion weightlifter. Keep in mind that we don't have much evidence for these skins beyond the descriptions, but the descriptions from the skins in the actual game is potentially all the evidence we need. Any reskins are possible, but I'm not going to add them just in case. This section is probably the least researched since it's very time consuming to go through all the maps, but here are the skins that I could find that are referenced from the maps in Overwatch. The young Hanzo and young Genji skins can be seen on Nepal Village in a photograph. Yeti Hunter Mei is seen in a newspaper on Lisheng Tower Night Market, and from Planet in my Discord, Ribbit is seen on Para Iso. I don't know if Dart Frog and Hippity Hop are canon, so I'm not going to add them just in case. Also, if we consider the Zeus Junker Queen statue on Ilios Lighthouse, we would then have to consider every single battle for Olympus skin as part of the mythology in Overwatch lore. However, the statue seems to have been removed, so I'm not going to count it as it seems to have been retconned. Fittingly for our last chapter is the Miscellaneous and only has one skin, Painted Doomfist. I did mention that it is possible that since I didn't read these short stories, that a skin would be described in there that I would miss and then not count as lore accurate. Well, Painted Doomfist is apparently one of those. This is because according to the wiki, Painted Doomfist apparently shows up when he made his final appearance in Unity Plaza. Therefore, the skin is probably canon. And I guess that's it. I'm sure there isn't a map that I accidentally overlooked that would completely change the entire outcome of this video. Wait, did I ever talk about Blizzard World?
Oh, that's boo-boo. 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 Boo-boo.
So, due to the existence of Blizzard World, we then have to assume that any skin that is supposed to be a Blizzard character is then canon to Overwatch, since Blizzard games are apparently canon in Overwatch like Hearthstone. So the skins that I know of using the Overwatch wiki, I'm very sorry I didn't go through every skin to double check this, are Lilith Mora, Inarius Farah, Imperius Reinhardt, Butcher Roadhog, Demon and Gilded Hunter Sombra, Asmodan Wrecking Ball, and Barbarian Zarya. Those skins were from Diablo. We then have StarCraft skins like Immortal Orisa, Reinhardt, Heaven's Devil Reinhardt, Kerrigan Widowmaker and Nova Widowmaker. And the final group I know of is Warcraft, being Blackhand Doomfist, Illidan Genji, Lich King Reinhardt, again Reinhardt for like the 5th time, Tyrande, I don't know how to say that, Symmetro, Sindorir Symmetra, I don't know what these names are, Magni Torbjorn, Diamond Magni Torbjorn, Sylvanas Widowmaker, and Thrall Zenyatta. And with that, I can't think of any more possible lore-accurate skins. Many of these I would have never found without the help of some of my Discord members, so shout out to them. And that actually makes me really worried that I missed some obscure skin or detail on a map or short story. So please tell me if you find any more, and I'll try and have a pinned comment to update stuff. There just is one last small issue. If Blizzard exists in the Overwatch universe, then would that mean that Overwatch the game exists in Overwatch? Since Blizzard is canon, Blizzard making Overwatch would be canon, meaning that every single Overwatch skin would be canon in that scenario. The only issue with this theory is that it would cause like the biggest plot hole ever you've ever seen. So in my opinion, even though I wanted to end this video saying that every Overwatch skin was canon, I also don't think there is a reference to Overwatch the game on Blizzard World. So my best guess is that Blizzard is canon, but Jeff Kaplan was shot out back and never made Overwatch.